Hello everyone, and welcome to the Age Group Triathlon podcast. My name is Simon Olney, I'm a professional triathlon coach, and in this week's episode I'm going to be looking at how alcohol affects triathlon performance. Now, I'm recording this in early December, and it is definitely the season of office Christmas parties, catch-up drinks with friends who you haven't seen for years. Even sort of the Christmas period, New Year period itself, it's traditional to drink alcohol on these days. And I want to take a little bit of time to, it's not going to be the longest episode in the world, but I want to take a little bit of time to have a look into sort of how it realistically affects our triathlon performance, because I think there are a lot of kind of myths and misconceptions surrounding the subject. Now, nothing that is included in this episode is going to be medical advice. I mean, I will be asking you to sort of ask yourself some questions, maybe some reflective questioning. But at no point am I trying to suggest, insinuate anything like that about you as an individual. Simply going to highlight sort of some of the issues that athletes that I've worked with over the years have kind of raised and talked to me about with this, because it is a complicated subject, which is multifaceted and affects people's lives in ways that I don't really understand. Now, the first thing I wanted to make clear here is that I myself drink alcohol. So before you listen to this and think, oh, you know what, is this guy up on his high horse, he's probably some unbearable teetotaler. I'm not. I think that alcohol, it works well as a bit of a social lubricant. It helps people to relax. It helps a lot of people to forget about the problems that they have in day-to-day life. I mean, if it wasn't for alcohol, then I'd never have got together with my first girlfriend. I remember, she went to the bar at a club, and she came back, and she said, "Oh, they gave me 2 pints, so you got 2 pints," which I had to drink. I thought it was great. I can't believe that I fell for that. But it's useful for that kind of social lubricant. It is also useful just sort of to generally unwind. It does quieten the noise in our brain down a little bit, and I have been relatively privileged in that I've never had sort of any major issues in my life that I felt that I needed alcohol to stop my brain from running at 100 miles out to try to give me some peace and try to give me some calm. So, again, I'm aware that there are lots of people who've got very specific situations and needs, and I'm definitely not, trying to shame anyone at any point in this podcast, but I'm acknowledging that, I myself drink a bit of alcohol. I think, it can be nice to help relax, to have a bit of fun with friends. But I'm not going to pretend to understand your unique relationship with it. Now, before I get stuck right into the episode and the content of it, I wanted to share something that I'm working on. So in early January, my plan is to launch an online triathlon club. So this is a club for people who either they live too rurally, so they don't have a community around them, or like myself, they've got mixed feelings about the whole triathlon club thing. It's very difficult when egos and committees and this all sort of get involved, and it really can drain the kind of the fun from the club if it ends up getting embroiled in political issues. Because a lot of triathlon clubs, they are run by people who very generously give an awful lot of their time. I spent several years as the head of triathlon at one of London's largest clubs, and it was a running club that had a triathlon arm. And it did a lot of good, but also I found that a lot of people on the committee, they had been there for decades, they had egos, they didn't like change, a lot of them didn't like triathlon, they wanted to just be a running club. And there were all sorts of issues, again, if you can't make the club swim, if you're not available on the weekends to join the cycles, they can be of limited value. So I wanted to put together a online triathlon club where people can come and they can share experiences, find a community. There's going to be a weekly swim set that you can follow. There is going to be chances for you to contribute with the community and to earn sort of different free coaching products from me. And this is all going to be completely free, now and always. So this is going to be launching in January. I just wanted to put it on your radar so that when the launch does come around, then you understand what I'm talking about. Now, diving into the subject matter at hand, which is how alcohol affects triathlon performance. So, to start with, I'm going to look at what I believe personally is the biggest impact that alcohol has on our triathlon performance, and that is its impact on our ability to be able to train sustainably and consistently. Now, if somebody were to go out on a Friday night and get absolutely blasted, they are not going to wake up on a Saturday morning and feel like going out for their long run. They are going to find an excuse, a reason not to, or it will probably be curtailed. And essentially, they have lost a day of training due to being too unwell through their own choice to train. And you know what? I think those of you who listen to this podcast regularly will think that, Simon, he's a relatively laid back coach. He's understanding. I'd like to think that I show sort of empathy and understanding of people not being able to hit all of their workouts all of the time. But when the reason that you're not able to follow the workouts that I set for you and achieve your goals, which, I'm very passionate about helping you achieve, if the reason is because you choose to, by choosing to drink more than you know that you should the night before, that's when I do get a little bit of the hump, if I'm honest. Now, all of us at some point have woken up, or even during the night itself, got to the point where we thought, yeah, I've drunk too much here. And this is something, again, I really don't drink a lot these days. Even to me, like after 2 pints of cider, I could be sat there in the pub and think, yeah, you know what? Like, I definitely feel that I'm now like a kind of, I wish I hadn't had that last kind of half of a pint. You get to a point where you get, hang on, like this has stopped being fun. This has stopped being enjoyable. And when it bleeds into the next day, especially when it comes to triathlon training, because we'll normally be up, relatively early in the day. Most of us, we have other things to do with our weekend other than go out on a bike ride or a run. It's not a case of, we can wait for our head to clear and then head out and do our training later because we might have other plans. So I think this for me is kind of the part that I have sort of the biggest issue with per se, is that if somebody goes out and has a big session on a Friday night, if they get carried away, if they don't exhibit that sort of their self-control, that voice in their head doesn't go, you know what, we have got a ride to do in the morning, then that for me, is sort of the biggest impact. Because you wake up on a Saturday and you can feel absolutely horrible. You may wake up and immediately regurgitate the contents of your stomach into the toilet. If you've got an especially bad hangover, and it may be that by the time that Sunday morning comes around, that you're still not actually ready to go out and to do this session that you have planned. Somebody very wise once said that, by drinking alcohol, you're borrowing happiness from tomorrow. And I think that definitely has a ring to it. Now, of course, if you were to go out and you were to have, just a little bit, maybe too much to drink, and you wake up and you've got yourself a bit of a headache, or you feel a little bit queasy, a little bit off, but you still head out maybe an hour or two later, and your run is a bit shorter than we had planned. It was going to be an hour 20, but it turned out being an hour instead. And, they're honest and they go, look, I just I don't know why. I didn't think I was drinking that much. I just felt really rough, but I got in what I could. That I have absolutely no problem with. Because you know what? There's more to life than triathlon. And as I'm going to touch on later, alcohol is very important in a lot of social situations. I guess the real issue is people who drink like there is no tomorrow, who really go in on that big binge, big binge drinking. Often peer pressure is involved, and they end up writing the rest, the entire of their weekend off as a result, really. And it doesn't matter what it is that you do in the week. If you are working sort of 9 to 5, Monday to Friday, we are going to be getting sessions done during the week, but especially if we're training for longer events, we need to be getting in those long, important, sort of long runs on the weekend. Now, a few years ago, I remember I was training this young lad, and I would say he was kind of early 20s, mid 20s, somewhere around there. And he told me in a very kind of matter of fact way, but I think we started in November. Like between now and the new year, I'm going to be getting messy every weekend. And from the new year, that's it. That's going to stop. I'm going to cut it out and I'm going to go teetotal. And I'm going to focus on my training. And this, I think it's something that some athletes are very prone to. Is it's this all or nothing approach. If they're going to go out and they're going to drink, then they're going to get absolutely wasted. Or they're not going to drink at all. And again, I know it could be very easy for me to say, look, people just need to learn self-control, but that's incredibly condescending. I don't understand what it is that makes different people's brains tick. But alcohol in moderation really is going to have very little effect on your triathlon performance. If a handful of times a year, if it's a wedding or a work Christmas party or something like that, that's absolutely fine. And I'd much rather that athletes say to me, again, like this chap did, honestly, like the weekend, it might be a little bit of a write-off. Like, I'm not sure how much I'm going to get done. I'd much rather they were open and honest and said that, so that I can then plan that around, rather than me, go and spend this time writing this training that they know in their heart of hearts that they're not really going to be able to do. So I do think it is unnecessary for a lot of people to go teetotal and to stop drinking altogether when they do their triathlon training. But if they have their own of the brain, and that's the only way that they know they can kind of show they can control their drinking, I should say, is by just stopping altogether, then that is of course much more preferable than going out there and and getting wasted and losing a lot of training as a result. Now, on the subject of hangovers, I wanted to touch on the subject of, well, why is it that we get hangovers? And there's an awful lot of nonsense out there on the subject that I've believed at various points in my life. But the bottom line really is that if you are drinking alcohol, you are poisoning your body. There's no way of sort of getting around this fact. Now, if you are, just having a low amount, a small amount, then the effects really aren't that profound at all. You have that slight sort of that slight loss of self-control, of awareness of your surroundings, of coordination. It switches off that filter in our brain, right? We're much more likely to say or do what we think is going to be a good idea at the time, than we are to sit back and think about what it is that we're supposed to say. And I think again, this is one of the kind of the positives, I guess, of alcohol, is that you can actually have, if you and like a friend, your partner, co-worker, sort of something like that, if there's been something that's been kind of bubbling away under the surface that you're finding it hard to bring up and have a conversation about, if both of you have sort of a drink or so, that can just allow you to both be a little bit more relaxed and to discuss this in a frank, grown-up way, rather than doing so in a state where one of you is going to immediately get very defensive or angsty about it like that. So don't get me wrong, there are definite I can definitely see the sort of the appeal, and sort of uses is probably the wrong term to use. But yeah, when you are drinking alcohol, you have essentially sort of poisoned your body, and the hangover is the recovery from that poisoning, basically. Again, a very gross oversimplification, but we can't get around the fact that it is, I believe, a class 1 carcinogenic, which is something that's designed, is going to give you cancer. Now, there are carcinogenics in all walks of life. If we never touched a single drop of alcohol because it was a carcinogenic, we'd also probably have to look at removing large parts of our diet, which could be considered to cause certain types of cancers. You could live your life in fear if you believe what it is that the tabloids tell you or top doctor recommends. I think we've all seen this nonsense online. But yeah, the matter of the fact is, alcohol is not good for you, and a hangover is a result of your body, being poisoned and trying to clear all of this toxins, I guess, want of a bit of a term. I don't know if that is the correct term to use, but it is trying to flush this out of your system. And you can read all that you want about different tips to avoid getting hangovers, but let's be honest, nothing works except for just not drinking quite as much. Now, again, if you are to have salt, if you were to have plenty of water, pace yourself through the night, these all can help, and these can all reduce the severity, or I guess not the chance of getting a hangover, but only as a result of drinking less of your body bloodstream being made up of alcohol, I guess, really. So it is definitely, you do need to frame it that way. Look, I am suffering this morning. I'm unwell because I've poisoned myself. And I'm unable to go out and to do my long ride because my body is recovering from the poison that I put in it last night. Now, on the subject of being dehydrated, the reason for that is that alcohol is what's called a diuretic, which is similar to coffee. And this works by essentially inhibits a hormone. I'm going to try and pronounce this. Vasopressin, I believe is how you pronounce it. Which is a hormone, and its job is to send fluid via the kidneys for filtering, and to allow it to the body to reabsorb that water if needs be. Whereas when that hormone is repressed, a lot of fluid just tends to go straight through and ends up straight in your bladder, which is why when somebody drinks, they're going to find themselves needing to go to the toilet more often. And it normally starts running very clear. This will also, as a result of your passing all this fluid through you, it's also going to lower the concentration of electrolytes. So that is potassium, that is sodium, that is magnesium, and these are, especially sodium, going to have an effect on us in the immediate term, when we are drinking, but definitely any training that we do the next day. This is why salty snacks are often paired with alcohol, because it helps to manage that that system there. Now, the way to avoid this effect is, either to not drink, that's the only way we can avoid it completely, or to replace lost fluids as we're drinking to reduce that chance of that dehydration. Now, if I am going to go down to the Red Lion on a Friday night and I'm going to have 1 or 2 pints, I don't need to worry about this. But if you are somebody who can handle their drink and who might go out and might have several more drinks without even actually feeling that bad the next day, if you are going to drag yourself out on a bike ride the next morning, then you would be well advised basically to have some water as well, either if it's water on the table while you're drinking, or whether it's having an alcoholic drink followed by water, an alcoholic drink followed by water. But again, that can be a bit kind of questionable socially, depending on who it is that you drink with. If you come back from the bar with some water. So yeah, it's difficult to balance. But if you get to the point where you are drinking alcohol non-stop, when you do get home, if you can take the chance to drink a good glass or two of water before you go to bed, that will really help. Now, the result of drinking lots of fluid, whether it's water or whether it's alcohol, is that you're going to need to go to the toilet more often in the night. There's lots of talk about, somebody having a beer blanket They're able to sleep in outdoors at night. They forgot their keys, and so they have a kip on the porch instead. Because they had a drink, and how, I'll have a drink before bed to help send me off. And apparently, when I was sort of younger, in the sort of the 90s, it was a bit more accessible for if, it was difficult to get the baby to sleep, that you could have, that mum could have a glass of wine before breastfeeding the baby, just to give it a little bit of a sort of an incredibly diluted nightcap to send them off that little bit quicker. I don't know whether that's the kind of thing that is frowned upon these days, but there's definitely sort of stories that I have heard in hindsight. Now, the reality, unfortunately, is that while alcohol can help us drift off to sleep a bit easier, definitely in certain cases, it inhibits a lot of systems that would help keep us awake. The downside really is that we get a much poorer night of sleep when we have been drinking, because it interferes with the systems in our body for REM sleep. So that is rapid eye movement, the kind of sleep when you dream. It definitely inhibits our ability, and many people who wake up after a heavy night, they won't actually have dreamt, they won't remember any dreams, and they're going to feel pretty ropey, and part of that is going to be, because we just didn't rest as well as we should have done. Some people, they'll barely get any sleep at all, and they'll still roll out, and they will go and they'll get their session. But I do feel I've definitely been on group rides in the past where somebody rolls up and they're full of tales. Oh, I got 3 hours sleep last night, but I still dragged myself out here. Okay, great. See if we got a medal for you somewhere. But they're obviously they're struggling, they're slower, they may actually start to feel progressively worse as the ride goes on, as sort of their hangover proper starts to kick in, and they'll sort of find themselves dropping back slower and slower. Oh, wait up, I'm struggling to keep up. And at that point, you definitely are just being a bit selfish if you're coming along to a group ride feeling unwell and expecting people to slow down for you. Look, if you drag yourself out the door on sort of 3-4 hours sleep, get in your cycling kit and go on the group ride, because that's important to you. But you get about 90 minutes in and you really start to feel a bit rotten and a bit rough, that's okay. But in that case, just say, sorry guys, I'm gonna turn around, I'm gonna head off. I'm really not feeling great, rather than expecting the group to to wait for you and to ride at your pace. Now, triathletes aren't nearly as bad for this as cyclists and runners, but I know plenty of people who I've been chatting to at different sort of sportives. Like doing Ride London. And the first waves went off at the time when it was in Olympic Park, set off around about 6 a.m. And, chatting to people, at 12 a.m. last night, I was opening my 5th beer. And the thought that, being able to sink 5 beers, get 3 hours sleep, and then go out and put in sort of a 100-mile ride and do your absolute best work, you'd be kidding yourself if you thought you're setting yourself up for success. Triathletes aren't nearly as bad, because generally speaking, triathletes have a lot more invested in sort of a single day. They're more competitive. They have signed up for this race and they've been training for it for months, and they're not going to sabotage their performance by staying up late drinking the night before. But yeah, if you are just attending a sportive or a race, look, it's not for me to tell you how to behave, what to drink the night before, but the combination of the dehydration, which makes your blood thicker and makes it harder for blood to pump body around your body, the potential, at least, hangover symptoms that come with that, and the lack of restful sleep, it really is going to have a markedly negative impact on your performance. Now, if you are taking on an event like that for the 5th or the 6th time, sure, it doesn't matter, right? Especially if you're riding with friends and you're just sort of chaperoning them around and you're out there for a laugh, it's fine. It's none of my business. Um, but if you are taking on like an Ironman and this is a big event, you really need to make sure that you're in bed. I mean, if somebody's doing an Ironman, they're probably going to be up around about 3:30, maybe 4 in the morning, depending on the time of year. Summer definitely that early. If your event is a little earlier or later in the season, then it may be a bit later than that due to sunrise times. But you really want to be in bed as soon as you can be. And, by having sort of a drink or two to sort of to settle your nerves, as it were, the night before, I do think that is going to come back and bite you. And I guess I wanted to touch on at this point the difference between sort of alcohol as being sort of something that you drink when you're out with friends, celebrating something, just sort of enjoying life and using it as a way to sort of to switch your brain off for a few hours and relax a little bit. And somebody who then will start to use alcohol as a bit of a coping mechanism, as it were, out of kind of routine. There's definitely a difference in sort of behaviours there. Now, if you are somebody, I guess this is where I draw the line personally, where I think does somebody need to reevaluate their relationship with alcohol? Is that when you hear about dry January, sober October, challenges like this, where people go without drinking for a certain time, I guess I don't really tend to have this conversation with clients because it's none of my business what somebody does individually, but I'm sharing this, just putting this out there for people to reflect on, is that if you find the idea of not drinking any alcohol for a month to be very challenging, if you think it would take a lot of focus to be able to get through that month without any alcohol, that's when you probably need to ask yourself whether the relationship that you have with alcohol is healthy and whether it is going to be something that is still sort of adding value to your life, or whether it is something that is sort of quite simply holding you back. Now, for a lot of people, alcohol is how they will process and they will cope with the sort of the stresses and that of modern life. Look, we've all life hasn't turned out for any of us how we thought it would. If we were looking at it sort of from a sort of a career standpoint, as it were, we were told growing up, well, if you study hard and you go to university and you work hard, you'll get recognised, you'll earn lots of money, you get yourself a nice big house, and you'll marry someone and you live happily ever after. And let's be honest, that hasn't happened for anyone. It's an oversimplification that set us all up for disappointment and mental health issues galore. Additionally, it could be that people who you were led to believe would always be in your life are no longer in your life for whatever reason. There are all sorts of kind of disappointments and traumas and that in our lives that we are all coping with and we are all managing in one way or another. And for a lot of people, they will turn to alcohol to help with that, to help manage this, and to help switch off a little bit. Whereas for a lot of people, such as triathletes, they'll be more inclined to achieve this same effect with their training. If the sort of the effect of going out for a bike ride for a few hours or going out for a run is that we can, in some cases, we can achieve that same sort of similar. Euphoria is the wrong word, but that sort of those hormones, that happiness, that kind of switching the brain off. I mean, I know myself personally that when I go out for a run, that my brain is still rattling around for the first kind of 5 or 10 minutes, thinking about work, thinking about whatever it is that's bothering me at this point. Because let's be honest, we're all stressed, anxious, worried about something at every single point in our lives. We have days where everything feels brilliant, where everything is wonderful, and we feel that everything's worked itself out. But let's be honest, that rarely lasts more than a few days before some insecurities come up, before we remember this, or we start to worry about this, or we start to feel anxious about things that are out of our control. And exercise is a fantastic way of helping us be able to manage this, to cope with this. And For a lot of people, they will sort of turn to drink instead. Now, if you are somebody who has found themselves, I guess, sort of drinking out of sort of habit, because in the past that is how it's helped you kind of to process and to cope with sort of with life and sort of the stresses of sort of family or work, all of these things that we're all grappling with. That, well, have we actually got to the point now where we don't need to rely on this nearly as much, because we have found that triathlon is a great way to help us, to cope with this. Now, this isn't me telling you if you do triathlon, you don't need to drink alcohol as an escape. That is not what I'm saying at all, because I occasionally, well, I dabble in both. But I definitely don't use alcohol nearly as much these days as a way to kind of to feel, oh, I need a drink. That's not me. I don't generally feel that anymore. I know that if I do get back and I'm feeling a bit like that, that if I just stick my running shoes on and I just head out the door for a little 30-minute jog around the block, that is probably going to be better at switching that noise off and at sort of making me feel better and more grounded than it would be, opening a drink, opening a bottle of something and switching off that way. Now, again, there's nothing wrong with doing that occasionally, but what I really feel is dangerous, putting on my nutritionist's personal training hat here on as much as anything, is when people sort of start embracing a beer after work or wine o'clock, when it really starts becoming part of somebody's routine that they feel that they'd be a little bit lost without. I have read that drinking every day is actually worse for you in the long run than having an absolutely massive blowout binge drink on the weekend very occasionally. Now, again, I'm sure it depends who you ask. I'm sure there is, lots of research that would say the opposite. But I want to get people past sort of the idea of, oh, it's okay, it's just one glass of wine a night, it's not a problem. Because it turns out, actually, that triathletes were actually more prone to having a drinking problem than a lot of other population groups. Now, I wanted to gloss over very quickly a story that Susan Lack, who is a writer for Triathlete magazine, bravely shared as an article a few years ago, talking about how she, as a triathlete, used it as a mask for being an alcoholic. And that essentially, she started drinking to get away from what in her mind were sort of the not enoughs. Not pretty enough, not funny enough, not fast enough, not skinny enough, and she wanted to sort of quieten those voices of self-doubt in her head, and that's what she found, that she used alcohol to help kind of like I've said previously, sort of quieten those voices, those self-criticisms in her head. And she also noticed that the more that she trained, the longer that the sessions that she put in were, the more her drinking sort of got out of control, because she would say, oh, well, she said, I did a half marathon, I can celebrate it with a night at the bar because I earned it. And, if ever there was any doubt that crept into her head that maybe her drinking was getting out of control, that she might be drinking a bit much, and she'd, say, well, that couldn't possibly be the case. If I had a drinking problem, then I wouldn't be able to ride 100 miles. And she even shares that the night after she completed her first Ironman, she was so petrified that someone would come into a hotel room and tell her that she wasn't enough and that she hadn't actually completed the race, that she just sat in the bathtub drinking wine all night. And she theorises that a brain that is wired for endurance sports may also be wired towards alcoholism, that chasing of the highs, and that those sort of extremes, as it were, that we can take our body to. Because interestingly, when she has gone to different events and she's got chatting to people, I guess in quite sort of candid, vulnerable moments, that a number of them have shared that same story, that they are recovering addicts from one thing or another. and have found endurance sport as a way to fill that gap. Now, I'm not trying to suggest that you or anyone else might be on a similar path. That is, I don't know you. I'm definitely not tilting this towards any of my athletes or anything like that. I am simply sat in my room talking to a microphone about some of the dangers of this. What I am going to do, though, is if you are reflecting and you are second guessing yourself a little bit, I'm going to share some resources down in the show notes of some different services that are available in various parts of the world for athletes who might be starting to wonder whether they do need to reassess their relationship with alcohol. Now, many endurance athletes wish that they could lose a little bit of body fat. It's a relatively, especially sort of among runners and cyclists, it is a goal for many people. In fact, it may even be the reason you got into sport in the first place. Now, if you are looking to lose a little bit of weight, then reducing your alcohol intake is a fantastic way to do this. The reason is that you can put away hundreds more calories than you realise, maybe even over 1,000 calories if you are going out for a big night, if you're celebrating something, if it's a wedding, if it's Christmas Eve and everyone's having a few drinks. You could easily find yourself drinking over 1,000 unnecessary calories. And this is something that a lot of people, if they are tracking their food, they fail to track their beverages, which can result in a dramatic underestimation of the amount of calories they've consumed in a day. So not only is it the calories themselves that we're consuming, it's also the form that these calories are taking. Now, there are 3 macronutrients: carbohydrate, fat, and protein. Okay, and just about every single sort of food or drink item we have is going to fall into these categories. And yes, in a number of alcoholic drinks, there will be carbohydrate in there. And again, it's one of those kind of, I guess, like, again, it's never a red flag. I'm never going to look at someone and say maybe they have a problem with drinking, because that's not my place. I'm not judgmental like that. But if somebody starts talking about using alcohol as a way to carb load ahead of a race, I do start to think, yeah, I think you're just trying to justify that to yourself. Now, it could be in a completely harmless way. It could just be a throwaway joke or a comment. I don't really think anyone thinks that having some drinks before a race is the healthiest thing to do or the best thing for their performance. However, we need to understand that not only is sort of a carbohydrates found in alcohol, I guess the more important element is ethanol, and this is the 4th macronutrient. Yes, the only thing that your body can digest that isn't carbohydrate, fat, or alcohol is ethanol. And the body isn't designed to consume ethanol. We have not evolved to be able to sort of optimize our metabolism for it. What happens when we drink is that we end up with ethanol in our digestive system, and our body goes, what's this? What is this? What are we supposed to do with it? And it works out, oh, hang on a minute, this ethanol, this is energy. The way that alcohol catches fire and burns very easily, very quickly. Well, this is because it's so simple for it sort of to break down into energy. And within the human body, we can metabolize this ethanol incredibly quickly. And so the body, it's a very simple thing. It would go, okay, how is it that we can get energy quickest? And it would go, oh, well, this ethanol here, we can burn this really quickly. And the way that the human body works is that it is least likely to want to digest protein. It doesn't like digesting protein, but it will do if it absolutely has to. But it will prefer to burn fat. So if there is fat available, it will probably choose to burn that ahead of burning protein. But what it really wants to burn, what the body's favourite energy source is carbohydrate. So if our body is burning carbohydrate, then that is going to be in its happy place there. As a backup, it will burn fat, and as an absolute last resort, it will burn protein, which can involve breaking down your muscle mass actually, if you are exercising, you're underfueled. But right at the top of this tree, above carbohydrate, is ethanol. Now the result of this is that if you have your dinner before you go out drinking, and you're out drinking and you are plying your body with ethanol, it's not going to start digesting the carbohydrate, the fat, and the protein that you had for dinner. It's going to go, oh, I'll just burn this ethanol instead. And what does the body do with excess sort of calories that it cannot use? Well, it stores them as body fat, doesn't it? I think we all know that. So it is incredibly, I guess, sort of counterproductive for us to not only be taking on extra calories, but extra calories in a form that is going to inhibit our body's ability to digest the other macronutrients. But I think the answer here is moderation. It is, if you just have a glass of wine, or you just have a pint of cider, the chances of you having any real notable negative effects, whether that's weight gain or hangovers, anything like that, are very much negligible. And you don't really need to worry about this an awful lot. We all make suboptimal choices in our day-to-day lives, whether it is staying up later than we maybe should, whether it's neglecting our stretching. There are all sorts of ways that we could optimize our performance that, let's face it, none of us are doing. Even the very best professional athletes, we all are. We all are doing, I guess, are making mistakes. Not being as stringent as we should about different areas of performance, and that's okay because we're not robots. Now, if you were an Olympic athlete who was sort of 3 months out from the Olympics, or maybe an Ironman athlete getting ready for the World Championships, maybe this is where you do need to sort of completely and totally cut out alcohol, and you do need to make sure that you're hitting absolutely everything every day, because this is a day that is going to be sort of career defining, maybe even life defining for some people. Yeah, that's time you should probably look at that. But if we are just amateur athletes who are trying to find a little bit of health, a little bit of enjoyment, a bit of fitness, have some fun with triathlon, we don't need to worry about all of these individual sort of small areas that we could obsess over, but it's not sustainable. It is not sustainable for somebody to be able to sort of micromanage these things indefinitely. Now, it could be that for you, again, as I touched on earlier, the only way that you know that you can sort of manage your alcohol intake is by not drinking at all. Again, that's absolutely fine. But I guess I want to steer people away from the idea of, okay, well, like, I'm going to be in triathlon mode or Ironman mode for 6 months. I'm not going to drink. And then after I finish my Ironman, I'm going to go absolutely mental again. That swinging sort of approach really isn't very healthy. Your body's not going to thank you for that at all. So I would say the ideal situation, I know it's easier said than done, ideal situation is just to find a way that you can, enjoy alcohol within your life if you even want to drink it. But chances are, if you don't drink alcohol at all, you probably haven't made it this deep into this episode. It's be able to enjoy alcohol in a sort of a responsible way, in a way that is going to, be sustainable, where you're not going to end up with regular hangovers, you're not going to end up putting weight on, none of those sort of side effects are going to have an enormous impact on your performance. Swinging back to the sciencey side of things, I really haven't structured this episode as well as I could have. I apologise for it being a little bit of a stream of consciousness on my behalf. I probably should have put my notes in a better order. But the consumption of alcohol can lower muscle protein synthesis, which is our body's ability to build and repair muscle tissue. Now, you may say to yourself, oh yeah, but Simon, I don't want to get big. I'm a triathlete. I just want to run. I'm not worried about building muscle. And no, we're not generally speaking, worried about muscle size as triathletes. However, it is still going to be essential for us to recover from our training. So when we go out, when we swim, we cycle and we run, especially if we do strength sessions, we are actually breaking down our muscles. We are creating micro tears, we are damaging our legs and our arms and all of our muscles. And the idea is that when we go to sleep at night, then our body is going to use protein that we have consumed, because we're getting our 0.9 grams of protein per day, right, everyone? Right? And sorry, 0.9 per kilo of body weight. And the body then uses that and it repairs those muscles and they come back stronger than they were before. Not necessarily bigger, although there might be some slight toning, some slight increase in size. But broadly speaking, it impacts our body's ability to be able to recover from exercise. So if you were to go out and do a session, if you do sort of using the example from Susan Lack's article, she goes out and she does a half marathon, and she then has a night in a bar because she's earned it to celebrate. Well, that's going to affect her body's ability to be able to repair her muscles and to allow her to walk around like a normal person the next day. Again, it's not an enormous impact, and if it is the end of your season, if that was your big event, that one half marathon, then yeah, it's really not going to make much of a difference. You should be able to put your feet up, have a drink, enjoy yourself a little bit, definitely, if you have completed your biggest event of the year. But we need to be mindful of the effect that repeated alcohol consumption can have on our body's ability to recover. And alcohol consumption also actually lowers our testosterone level. Have you ever heard of brewer's droop? It is the kind, it may surprise you when you see how kind of fighty some people can get when they drink alcohol, but generally speaking, alcohol will lower our testosterone level when we're drinking, and as a result, that is going to it's going to impact our body's ability to recover, and it is going to impact our performance as well. There is a reason that testosterone is a banned supplement, because it does increase performance, and the more time that you spend with suppressed testosterone levels due to alcohol consumption, that is going to have a negative impact. Now, if you are listening to this and you are thinking to yourself, yeah, maybe I do drink a bit more than I should. Maybe I've not been in denial of having a drinking problem or anything like that, but it's making you reassess things and thinking, yeah, if I'm dedicating all this time and money to training, maybe I should tighten up a little bit here. The issue that a lot of people struggle with, like this client that I shared the story with early in the episode, is that for many, their social relationships, their friendships, revolves around alcohol. It could be a case of, it's a rugby night, it's going to get absolutely mental, it's going to get really messy. Or it could be that the only thing they really have in common with their friends is that they drink with them. And it may be that in fact I remember overhearing a conversation in a pub garden where this one guy was putting his three mates to the sword a little bit, going that he doesn't like the vibe between us, and he thinks the only reason that they hang out is because they can only bear each other when they're drunk, when they're drinking. And that it can be very difficult, because on the one hand, I, as someone who, I guess sort of the place that I found myself in life, I guess I've never found it hard to make friends. I found it a lot harder to meet women, especially in my 20s. But like friends, I've always found that's come a lot more naturally to me. For me, if I was spending time with people who, if I signalled, oh, yeah, I'm going to skip this round, guys, or oh, I'm going to have a soft drink instead. I'm going to alternate between soft drinks and alcohol. If I was friends with people who then started mocking me and rinsing me for not keeping up, for not drinking enough, personally, I'd be thinking, you know what, I'm going to go and find some better mates. you know, and I think again that's something that triathlon is very good at, is that we can meet people, sort of socialize with people who have that shared interest with us of swimming, cycling, running, strength, good nutrition, people who we actually have things in common with. But equally, what I don't want people to do is I don't want people to go, oh well, I'm training for this Ironman now, and I'm too good for you guys, and they sort of like drift away from what could actually end up being quite an important friendship group for them. I always ask people to think beyond that race finish, think beyond that finish line, because if you are sort of really taking advantage of your partner or your friends or your children, whoever it is, if you're neglecting people, if you're not spending time with them because you're so focused on this training, think about what things are going to look like after you cross that finish line, whether it's a sprint or an Ironman. What are you going to do? What could you possibly do to sort of to prepare yourself for that? Basically, your life is, you're not going to sort of encounter some transcendent state when you complete this Ironman, become a different person. You're going to come down from this high of crossing that finish line, and you're going to need friends and family around you, because it's really important. Like, it is so important to have that support network. And if you are no longer spending time with these friends because you're training for an Ironman, when you cross that finish line and you ask them if they want to hang out, want to spend some time together, then you don't want to like burn those bridges and they find excuses not to, and you can then find yourself a bit sort of socially isolated, and oh well, my husband or my wife, well, they'll sort of they'll understand, and well, I want to do this with them, but they're still, they haven't forgotten about all of the times that you left them, you hung them out to dry. You came back late from your sessions and they had to cancel their plans and all of that, okay? You do need to think long term, and keeping a friendship group around you is really important. Now, for me, triathlon is such a large part of my life that the friends that I have from swimming, cycling, running are real genuine friends who I would choose to spend time with, and this is one of the reasons that I am sort of creating this online triathlon club. Obviously, you're not going to be able to go down the pub with the members of this triathlon club, but you are going to be able to chat to them. You are going to be able to help support them. You are going to be able to chat to them. I'm hoping to run some group rides on Zwift, or maybe Training Peaks Virtual, maybe both, where we can all come together and have a little bit of a chit chat. You will have this community around you, but not everyone is going to be of that mindset. If you are coming at this from a place of, what, I'm going to do my triathlon this year and then I'm going to step away from the sport, I mean, that is something that I would, I generally kind of advise people against having that mindset anyway. But you would lose that kind of community that you built up if you did decide that, triathlon was just going to be a 1 year affair for you. So I think it is really important to see triathlon as being something you want to keep up indefinitely. Or maybe you don't do triathlon indefinitely. Maybe you step away from the sport after a year, 2 or 3, once you've sort of completed your Ironman, if you've done what you wanted to. But to maintain some friendships, maybe keep up some running, some cycling, try to keep that social element of it. Because I think one of the reasons that, maybe it sounds arrogant of me to say, and I'm sorry if it does, one of the reasons that I've always sort of found it relatively easy and natural to make friends is that I've always had different hobbies at different times in my life, and I have bumped into people, spent time with people who I have a shared interest with. And that shared interest is so critical as a foundation for you to be able to, to have a long lasting friendship. However, I did want to share a few ideas with you of if you find yourself in a social situation where you wish you could drink less, but you can't, and you don't want to lose the friendships that you have. This is where alcohol beers actually really they have their moment to shine. Because if you want to go out and you want to have a few drinks, a couple of drinks, that's absolutely fine. But what I recommend is if you go to the pub or a club or wherever, a bar, wherever you drink, and you have some alcoholic drinks. First couple of drinks you have can be alcoholic, and you can get to the point where you have yourself, a nice buzz. Okay, feel a bit more relaxed, feel happy, feel that I'm spending, good quality time with friends here. But realistically, I know that if I drink a little bit more, I'm probably going to regret it the next day, and it's probably going to, affect my enjoyment. But everybody is pressuring me, to drink more. What I would do, and again, I know this isn't always as easy, but if either it's your turn to go up for a round, or you nurse your drink, you drink it a little bit slower, and you go up to the bar kind of out of sequence with people, you can always say that you don't feel so great or you're very full or whatever, and you order yourself a non-alcoholic beer and ask them to stick it into a pint glass for you, if it's bottled. Then that is a good way for you to sort of, for all intents and purposes, to be keeping up with everyone. You can still enjoy the taste. You can still be one of the guys or the girls. I mean, it might be a bit more difficult if everyone is sort of drinking wine, where I think non-alcoholic wine it's definitely around, but I don't think as many pubs carry it or bars carry it as non-alcoholic beer, and it can be more difficult. But if it is an opportunity for you to be able to to discreetly be drinking a non-alcoholic option, then that's honestly that's a good way to go about it. Because again, you're still involved, you're still being social, you're not seen to be the outsider, but you can drink a little less than you normally would, which would allow you to be able to get out the next day and to be able to maintain that balance between having nice fun time with your friends, not being a social outcast, and yet still be able to get a ride in or run in the next day. And for me, that's perfect balance of both worlds. So let's wrap this one up, shall we? So, in a conclusion, the effects that alcohol can have on your body is that it can cause us hangovers. We are poisoning our body. We are increasing our risk of cancer. We are doing bad things to our body on a physiological level when we consume alcohol. And whilst this is okay, like occasionally or in moderation, we don't want to do it indefinitely, and it can have a very real effect on our compliance to our training plan. There are a lot of calories in alcohol, and it does interfere with the metabolism of other macronutrients. So it is, if you are looking to cut down on, the little bit of timber that you have around the middle, then reducing your alcohol content is a great way to do this. It does affect our sleep quality. You may sleep for longer. You may sleep in conditions you wouldn't be able to sleep in otherwise because you're sort of a little bit dead to the world. But the quality of the sleep that you get, how restful your sleep is going to be vastly reduced. So please keep that in mind. It is going to affect our body's ability to create sort of muscle protein synthesis, so for it to be able to repair and build new muscle. It's also going to lower our testosterone, so that's going to have an impact on our performance and our ability to recover. It is a diuretic, so it is going to cause us dehydration. It is going to cause us to use the toilet more. It is going to dilute the levels of electrolytes in our bloodstream, which, our body, I should say, levels of electrolytes in our body, which is critical for our performance. And all in all, it is like on a physiological level, it is an objectively bad idea. However, when it comes to the social aspects, the ability to kick back, to be a bit more relaxed, to spend some time with friends on an occasional basis, it's absolutely fine. If you're doing it occasionally, I mean, I personally, I probably only have alcohol once every kind of like 6 to 8 weeks now. I really don't drink an awful lot. But you know what? I don't feel guilty when I have it. I know that, more often than not, it gives me a nice little buzz. It allows me to relax in what might be sort of a stressful social situation. Allows me to kick back and reminisce with friends, and this is absolutely fine in moderation. If we wanted to optimize every single element of our health, then we would find ourselves in trouble. But if you are the kind of person who the only way you can moderate your intake is by stopping all alcohol consumption, then there's absolutely nothing wrong with that if that's the method that you choose. Equally, if you find yourself using endurance sport to justify your alcohol intake, or you are having alcohol on sort of a daily basis, if it's just become part of what you do, then you may want to have a look at some of the resources down in the show notes if you are starting to have second thoughts over whether the relationship you have with alcohol is actually healthy, whether it's still adding anything to your life, or whether you feel that you might be starting to develop a bit of a problem. I hope that's been useful, maybe thought-provoking. I hope that's given you a better idea of how alcohol affects our performance. I hope it has been condescending. I really tried not to go down that route, but again, I don't know how successful I was there. If you have any questions on the subject, drop me a message. My email is down in the show notes. Obviously, I can't give any medical advice or anything relating to addiction or the like, but if you would like some more information, I would be happy to help. Otherwise, I'm going to wish you the very best for the week ahead. I really hope that you sort of enjoy yourself going into December, when it's going to, everything just starts to sort of slow down a little bit. It becomes a little bit more social. The accountability is a little bit harder in December, where our races are over. It's dark, it's cold, and that motivation can start to wane. But don't stress about this too much. I'd much rather that somebody has a slightly easier December, maybe misses a few sessions here and there, had good quality time with their friends and their family, and felt ready to go again in January. And then really drags themselves through December, not enjoying it, and then finds themselves sort of unmotivated to kick off when it really matters. Thank you once again for your company. I'll see you all next Tuesday morning.